Welcome to Big Skywriter, the podcast for storytellers of all shapes and sizes. Here's the host of Big Skywriter, Clint Morey.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for dropping by to listen. Now I have a question for you. Where is Zimbabwe? Now I'm serious. If I were to hand you a blank outline map of the world, would you be able to point to the country of Zimbabwe? Now, pointing in the general direction of a continent is not the correct answer. If you're like me, you might know that Zimbabwe is in Africa. But if you're like me, you couldn't point to exactly where in Africa it is located. Now, here's a description of the location from Britannica. Zimbabwe shares a 125-mile border on the south with the Republic of South Africa and is bounded on the northwest and west by Botswana, on the north by Zambia, and on the northeast and east by Mozambique. Does that help you? Or do you have difficulty knowing where those other countries are located? Now for me, I knew where South Africa was, and I had a good idea where Mozambique was, but I had no idea where Botswana or Zambia were located. So here's an outline map of Africa with Zimbabwe highlighted. If you're listening on the podcast, you can't see it, but if you're looking at my newsletter, you'll see a picture of it. I hope your geographical knowledge is better than mine, but this episode of the Big Skywriter is not about geography. It's about the economy. And most of us are probably aware that our country is going through some difficult economic times, and the immediate future doesn't look promising. Okay, what is coming to our economy looks terrible. And trust me on this, it's not Putin's fault. We have destroyed ourselves. And you would think that with inflation already here and threatening to get worse, America's news organizations would cover how other countries have handled similar challenges in the present and in the past. Perhaps we could learn what works and what doesn't. But how often do you hear about what happened in Germany in the 1930s, or what is happening in Zimbabwe or Venezuela in the present? I'm guessing not very often. So, it's time for a very short history lesson on the Zimbabwean dollar. The first Zimbabwean dollar, the ZWD, was introduced in 1980 and was worth a little more than the US dollar, $1.47 to be exact. But Zimbabwe had a number of social, political, and economic problems. Does that sound like any country you know today? And the Zimbabwean dollar, the ZWD, began to lose purchasing power. The government of Zimbabwe dealt with the problem by printing more Zimbabwean dollars. Does that sound like any country you know about today? Well, what happened in Zimbabwe? In 1983, one US dollar would get you one ZWD. Pretty good. But by 2006, one US dollar would get you 500,000 ZWDs. That's called inflation. Things got so bad, they had to scrap their ZWD and come up with a new currency, the ZWN. In 2006, you could exchange 1,000 ZWDs and get one ZWN. And $1 would get you about 650 ZWNs. Now, that's not as good as the original forget that. That's not as good as the original ZWD, but it was respectable. However, only 2 years later, $1 would get you 1 million ZWNs. In other words, it was worthless. So the government went back to work, scrapped the ZWN, and replaced it with a new currency, the ZWR. And if you had 10 billion ZWNs lying around, you could exchange them for one ZWR. But that new currency didn't last long either, and the government came out with yet another new currency, the ZWL. If you had 1 trillion ZWRs hidden under the mattress, you could exchange them for one ZWL. Things were so bad The government even stopped printing money for a while and told their people to use the currency of other countries. The US dollar was the most popular, with the South African rand being the second common choice. So what did all this mean? It can be summed up with the I word, inflation. In January of 2008, the inflation rate in Zimbabwe was 100,000%. Think about that for a minute. If you bought a hamburger for $5, the next time you bought it, it would cost $5,000. But things got worse. 4 months later, the inflation rate in Zimbabwe was 1,000,000%. That $5 hamburger would now cost $50,000. And only 2 months after that, the inflation rate had risen to 250,000,000%. That $5 hamburger would now cost you $12,500,000. Things got so bad, the government finally outlawed inflation. In other words, they set price controls. Does that sound like any country you know today? Well, I've got a takeaway. I could go on for quite a while describing the history of and the current situation in Zimbabwe, but if you want to know more, I've given you some links on my printed newsletter. The next time that you hear the government or the Fed or a politician wants to spend $1 trillion to fix something, consider what it's really going to cost you. There are plenty of examples in the past and the present to see the results of such actions. Before I go, there's a blessing I would like to share with you from the Old Testament. May the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord's face radiate with joy because of you. May he be gracious to you, show you his favor, and give you his peace. Numbers 6:24-26. Until the next time, be the reason someone smiles today.